The record. Shalom Avracha, Yedidim Hayakarim. Many apologies for what just happened, and thank you for staying on. And Bez Hashem Yisbarach, you're not going to regret it, because this is going to be a shear to prepare us for Matan Torah. We're now at the beginning of the 3 days, the holy 3 days that comes before the Kabbalah Satira. I just read today that Rav Moshe Sternbuch describes his memories of what it was like to go through the Shleishis Yemei Hagbala when he was learning in the yeshiva of the holy Rav Moshe Schneider in London before the war and during the war. He says the 3 days beforehand we will be learning in the Beis Medrash, and the Rebbe would come, and during morning Seder, he would just clap on the bima and shout out, Shleishis Yemei Hagbala, the holy Har Sinai, the holy Matan Torah is coming. Then he would just carry on learning, and it would just be like, getting us into the atmosphere, get us into the mode. So what I want to do with you now is share with you an idea that I've repackaged in a way that we can understand it on a deeper level and in a more accessible way. An idea from Meir Rebbe, Rav Moshe Shapira Tzadik Zichron Livracha. I was able to hear this from him back in the day. He speaks this over in a few places. It's not a well-known idea, but it is a complete and total game changer in understanding of what is our avoda on Shavuos and what is our avoda since Har Sinai as we await for the Melech HaMashiach. So let's begin at the beginning. The opening question is my own observation, and that is the Gemara in Shabbos Daf Peites Amud Aleph, wherever I can. This is the Shabbos Chabura. I like to begin with the Masechta, and on Daf Peites Amud Aleph, there's the famous question: why is Har Sinai called Har Sinai? The Gemara gives several answers until we get to the famous answer. I'm just going to read it to you. Daf Peites Amud Aleph at the very bottom. The Gemara says, why to Kumai Har Sinai? What is the reason for Har Sinai? And the Gemara's final answer is Shiyarda Sina La'olam La'umas Ha'olam. Hatred came down to the nations of the world. So this is the final answer. Har Sinai is the mountain of hatred. Now, for those of you who get Mishpacha magazine, I'm not pushing you to get it, but if you do, so for this Shavuos, you'll see an article by yours truly, that's me, Menachem Nissel, about anti-Semitism. And there I write, as passionately as I possibly could, why is it that after 2,000 years of Tsaras and Galus, people are still trying to find logical understanding of why Goyim hate us, based on sociological understanding, trying to explain it this way, trying to explain it that way. This is a disease that the Jewish people have had since the Churban, to try and understand the narrative without putting Chazal as the centerpiece of everything. And this bothers me. In Mishpacha magazine itself, prominent writers will talk about anti-Semitism from beginning to end without quoting a Chazal, without saying that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is talking to us. And my article basically says that there are two opposite strands in anti-Semitism in Chazal. The first is Parshas Shmos, where HaKadosh Baruch Hu says that the Jewish people have gone off the derech, they are assimilating into Egyptian culture, and they're quoting the pasuk in Tehillim Kuf Beis, I think it is. Hafach libam lisnei isam. HaKadosh Baruch Hu artificially takes the nations of the world and flips them over, in the words of the Medrash at the beginning of Parshas Shmos, from being our beloved friends to being our bitter enemies. Hafach libam means there's an artificial switch off the narrative that HaKadosh Baruch Hu does, similar to what he does to Paro's heart. He will do that to your neighbor. Now, if you understand that Chazal, so this Chazal is saying there's nothing you can do about it. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants to give up a wake-up call. He will take your neighbor, like my mother, reported growing up in Germany, and my relatives reported growing up in Hungary, that your neighbor who loved you one day hates you the next day, like my NCSYers are telling me about their schoolmates who was their friends one day becomes their enemy the next day. It goes against logic. I call it Candace Owens syndrome, tongue-in-cheek. For those who know the reference, there's nothing you can do about it. That's one end. But the other end is the exact opposite. It's Har Sinai, Sheyarda Sina Umas Ha'olam, which is the classic maramakom of what's called envy, that the nations of the world hate us because at Har Sinai we received the Torah, meaning we received an upgrade that lifted up to what the Kuzari calls the fifth level of creation. Until then, humanity, the medaber, the creature that speaks, was level 4, doimim, tzemeach, chai, medaber, inanimate. The vegetable kingdom, the animal kingdom in humanity. And now, the Kuzari says there was a fifth level called Klal Yisrael. So this is what's called the anti-Semitism that is based on envy. So those are the two opposite poles. One is because of the lowliness of Klal Yisrael. One is from the greatness of Klal Yisrael. One is from the fact that we have gone down, and one is from the fact that at Har Sinai we went up. Now, I'm simplifying everything, but what I want to point out is that this idea that Har Sinai is the sinna that they have for us is the standard way of reading this Gemara. Rabbeinu Bachya in Chumash speaks this out in great length in Sefer Vayikra. But now I want to show you something which is insane, that Rashi, and I don't know who talks about this Rashi, this is my own understanding, Rashi seems to be saying something opposite from what most people normally understand is what Sina is all about. What does Rashi say? Rashi says, Sina l'umas olam, shaloi kiblu boy Torah. The hatred is that we hate them, or Har Sinai hates them because they did not accept on Har Sinai the Torah. So this does not make any sense whatsoever. This is like a Pel Atzuma, that at Har Sinai, hatred was created, that the Jewish people would hate the non-Jewish world, the ones that did not accept the Torah, like the Midrashim that we all learned as children, the Bnei Yishmael, and the Bnei Esav, all of this hatred that the nations, that we have for the nations began at Har Sinai. So I don't really understand why this is called a Sina. We could feel sorry for them. We could say, you guys are Bali Taiva, you guys are stupid for not accepting the Torah. What are you thinking? But Sina, that we hate you because you did not accept the Torah. On the contrary, the Torah is our privilege, something that we are proud that belongs to Klal Yisrael and not the nations of the world. Where do we see the Imek of the hatred that we are supposed to have for them? So that is the opening question I would like to ask. But now I want to take the Rambam, and I want to show that the Rambam, the Holy Rambam, Hilchis Talmud Torah. So here I have, here we go. The trusted Rambam, Hilchis Talmud Torah. I want to ask a few questions on the Rambam in Hilchis Talmud Torah, Perek Aleph. For those of you that are joining us, we are about to learn an incredible Chiddush from Meiri V'Rebbe Reb Moshe, Tzadik Zichron Livracha, and we're going to notice a few diukim in the Rambam in Hilchis Talmud Torah. So, first of all, right up front, Hilchis Talmud Torah begins with the opposite of what we expect the Torah to be, the Rambam to be writing. How should Hilchis Talmud Torah begin? It should begin with the mitzvah, you have a chiyuv to learn Torah. That's not what it says. It begins with the opposite. Nashim va'avadim p'turim mitalmud Torah. Almost as if the Rambam is telling you that the mitzvah of studying Torah is so obvious I do not need to mention it. And therefore, I begin by telling you who does not need to keep Torah. Excuse me, who does not need to study Talmud Torah. Avol Katan Aviv Chayv Lamdai, Lamda Torah Shenema, V'limadatim Asamis B'nechem L'David Bam. Ve'ein ha'isha chayeves l'lamed es b'na, shekol ha'chayev l'ilmoid chayev l'lamed. So we find out three categories that don't have to study Torah: women and servants. Okay, those two, and by a cotton, a child, the father has to teach them. So the first positive thing that is mentioned in the Rambam is the mitzvah of a father teaching a child. A mother does not have to teach her child because she is exempt. And then halacha beis, halacha gimel, all these halachas talk about the mitzvah of teaching Torah. So this is how the Rambam begins with the halachas of teaching Torah. Finally, halacha ches. This is halacha ches. We get to Kol Ish Mi Yisrael Chai B'Talmud Torah. Bein Ani, Bein Ashi, this is the famous Rambam. It's deep into the parak that every person is obligated to study Torah if you are a male, whether you are poor, whether you are rich, whether you are Shalim Begufay, Bein Bal Yisurim, whether you're healthy or not healthy, Bein Bachor, Bein Shayazakin Gadol Shetashish Keichai, whether you're a young man or you're a person without any strength, afilu ani hamachzin apsachim, even if you are a poor person that has to knock on doors, va'afilu bal isha ubanim, even if you are a person, this is the final afilu. The final afilu is the one with the most excuses, is a person who's married with kids. Nevertheless, chayev likvoyelai zman l'talmud Torah. So here it doesn't tell you that you have to learn Torah. Here it tells you have to be kivea itim. As we all know, as we go up to Shemaim, first 6 questions, one of them is kavata itim the Torah. What's the pasuk that we bring? Is it one of the many psukim in the Chumash that talks about learning Torah? No. It's a pasuk in Yeshua at the very beginning, where Hashem tells Yeshua, okay, Moshe Rabbeinu, he's no longer with us anymore. You've crossed the Yarden. You're now entering into the land. The land is where you are set up for failure to be a ben ish obanim. You're busy with parnasa. You're busy with worldly things. And Hashem says, the famous pasuk of Lo Yamosh, and ends with V'higisa by Yomim V'layla. Rambam brings down, Shenema V'higisa by Yomim V'layla. This pasuk V'higisa by Yomim V'layla, you should study Torah day and night. So the Rambam brings this down as the mitzvah of being kevea itim. But we still don't have what should be the introductory psukim in the Chumash. For example, the Shema, right? It says v'shinamtu levanecha v'dibarta bam v'dibarta bam. You should be learning Torah. Many other psukim like that in V'eschanan Ekev. So what exactly is happening over here? Furthermore, let's go back and read the halacha daled. Famous halacha as well. Hayahu lilmaid Torah v'yeshta ben lilmad Torah. Remember, the opening halachas is talking about the mitzvahs of teaching Torah. You have to prioritize yourself before your child. Im haya b'nai navain umaskil mashe yilmad yesimenu b'nai kai. Your son is better at learning than you. Your son comes first, but you should still learn. Shekashem shemitzvah alav lelamis b'nai. In exactly the same way that you have an obligation to teach your child, kach hu mitzvah lelamed es atzmai. You hear this crazy lashon. The Rambam says, in exactly the same way that you have to teach your child who's a better learning than you also have to teach yourself. When I was reading this, it reminded me of on Seder night. It says, even if you have no one at your Seder night, you're on your own, you have to tell the story to yourself. Almost as if you have to be 2 people. You have to be the teacher and the student in one body. And here it says you have to teach Torah. So it comes out, let's summarize the questions we have here on the Rambam before we come up with our huge chiddush. Let's summarize what's happening over here. The Rambam starts off negatively, right? This was our first question on the Rambam. Negatively. These are the ones that are exempt, women and your slaves and your servants. So it starts off negatively. Why is that? The second question is that we have to wait all the way to Halacha Ches, and there we find not even a mention of the classic psukim in the Torah that you should study Torah. It never says you should study Torah. All it says, all the halachas is to teach Torah, to teach Torah, to teach Torah, to teach Torah. And then halacha says, it says that everyone, even the ones with the excuses, the ones who are married with kids, who have to go to work, you have to mitzvah v'yigisa b'yomam v'layla. You should study Torah. And the Rambam will go on to say about the meaning of day Torah and night Torah, the special meaning of learning Torah at night. Fascinatingly, that the Rambam over here, the Rambam at the beginning, as you know, tells you a summary at the very beginning of what it is. It's there's two mitzvahs in Hilchos Talmud Torah, Lilmud Torah, and number two is to give kavod to those that are learning, which is the mitzvah of kavod Torah and kavod Talmidei Chachamim. But the mitzvah of learning Torah, when he summarizes it in Sefer HaMitzvahs, so this is my Sefer HaMitzvahs, look what he writes. He writes, quote, this is Mitzvahs Aseh Yud Aleph. He says, Shetzivanu lilmaid chachmas haTorah v'lelamda. In one breath, the mitzvah is to learn Torah and to teach it. Zeu shenikra Talmud Torah. Talmud Torah is to learn and to teach. Talmud Torah is to learn and to teach. Hu amru now, which is the pasuk he brings. He doesn't bring this over here. Vishinamtu levanecha. I know that pasuk. That's chumash. That's not v'yigisa b'yom v'layla. So then he goes on to say, v'lashon sifri levanecha elu hatalmidim v'chein hatamoitzi v'kol makom shehatalmidim kruim banim shenema. He talks about teaching Torah. V'shinamtam sheyeterascha mechudarim bepiv, etc. So this is fascinating that the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is defined in Sefer Mitzvahs as to learn and to teach. Rav Sadia Gaon and the Bahag actually break it into two separate mitzvahs because there's two separate psukim. There's a mitzvah to learn Torah and there's a separate mitzvah to teach Torah. But the Rambam all has it as one thing, and when you read it, it's almost as if teaching is the priority. And even when you learn on your own, you're actually teaching yourself. So the mitzvah is teaching. That's what the Rambam seems to be saying over here. So what on earth is happening over here? What is Talmud Torah? And those of you that saw the title of my class, I warned you, we're going to redefine the mitzvah that we've been doing since we were little children of learning Torah, based on this understanding of how the Rambam sets everything up. There's obviously a secret going on behind the scenes, and Moav Rebbe revealed the secret. So let me read to you his exact words. But I just wanted to tell you beforehand that what I'm about to share with you now, it's mamish. It's such a huge, big, seismic change of how we look at everything. Until now, you ask a person on the street, what is Torah all about? They'll tell you the obvious. If you don't know what you're doing, Torah is Lashon Hara. It's an instruction booklet. If you want to be a little bit more mystical, Torah comes Lashon Oraisa. The world is filled with darkness. The Torah is the light through the darkness. So we need Torah to be able to navigate our way through this world and to get to the next. It's not what it is. It's not what the Rambam's saying over here. He's saying something completely different. I'm just going to summarize. What he says over here. I missed out something. I'm just looking at my notes over here. Okay, before I say the big idea, hold on 1 second. Yeah, I missed out something over here. No, we're good. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. The big idea, let's jump into the big idea because I can't leave you all on this cliffhanger. What is my Rebbe's big idea? And this is what he said, that the mitzvah that we got at Har Sinai of learning Torah, of being lasik b'divrei Torah, this bracha that I just said, Asher Kedishanu Tzav Tzivanu lasik, to be isik b'divrei Torah. As Rabbi Yerucham used to say, the word lasik comes from the word asek, which means Torah is my geschäft, Torah is my business. To be involved in Torah, to be part of a Beis Medrash, to what we call in Yiddish to be a steig, a person is involved in Torah. What exactly is that mitzvah? The Rambam is teaching us over here that the essential mitzvah is the mitzvah, can we have a drum roll please, to perpetuate Maimed Har Sinai. That's the definition of what the mitzvah is. There was a moment in time where Kadosh Baruch Hu opened up everything from behind the curtain, the proverbial curtain, for his beloved nation, Klal Yisrael, in the Midbar. And on that awesome, incredible day, which was a Shabbos Kodesh, just after 49 days plus a day, we came out of Mitzrayim. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said the word Anochi. The Baal HaTurim says Gematria Kisei HaKavod. And we saw the purpose of everything, and we understood everything. And Klal Yisrael reached the 50th level. Ki ish echad, b'lev echad. We were there, back in the Garden of Eden. Adam Arishon Lifnei Achet, that's the Ish Echad B'Lev Echad. We were breathing in the beautiful smells of the flowers of Har Sinai, which the Sfarim bring down were from Gan Eden, the Kodesh Abrakim, and the Tal Shel Tchiyah, and everything that we went through, and everything that we experienced, and then everything that Revolva this time of the year used to go at great length to describe every detail. As the Ramban said, it's a mitzvah to picture this awesome event called Har Sinai. HaKadosh Baruch says, now I'm going to show you absolutely everything. Never lose that moment. Hold on to that moment and bring it all the way to the Melech Mashiach. Or, if you want, hold on to it and bring it all the way to that moment when we fix the sin of Adam and we go back into the Garden of Eden once again, a place that you and I call Olam Haba. So the mitzvah of Talmud Torah is be'etzem, the mitzvah of perpetuating what happened at Har Sinai. Now, why is this such a huge, big idea? Because it changes everything. And this is where the Rambam comes in. The Rambam comes in and says, there's a mitzvah leisaseh. And other Rishonim bring this down as well, but the Rambam does not. The Rambam, in his Sefer, where he says of all the things that the Rambam missed out, mitzvah is sheshachach harav, the mitzvahs that the Rambam missed out. He says one of the mitzvahs is, and he brings down the psukim in Parshas V'eschanan that says, and I quote, right, mitzvah sheshachach harav, leisas beis. He says, right, a person shlei nase milbanenu is Har Sinai. It is forbidden that our hearts for 1 second should forget about Har Sinai. And the Megillas Esther, which is the early Achrein that explains on the Ramban why the Rambam doesn't mention things, he explains something which is a massive chiddush. Harambam einem meine mitzvah zu ki ze kailel kol hatera kula. So there's a klal that the 613 mitzvahs that the Rambam brings down are mitzvahs that are pratim, not mitzvahs that are klalim. This mitzvah, says the Megillas Esther, in the understanding of the Rambam, that for 1 second we cannot forget Har Sinai, is what's called, let's say in English, the air that we breathe. It is our essential existence. It is something that precedes commandments. Mitzvahs are commandments, connections to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. No, it is the essential life force of the Jewish people, precedes the world of mitzvahs. At Har Sinai, unleash an existence that says that Torah is our everything. And therefore, says Reb Moshe, when the Rambam introduces the laws of Talmud Torah is the essential mitzvah of perpetuating Torah. So he says, we all know, I don't have to mention all the psukim in the Chumash that say you have to study Torah, because that is a mitzvah kales. That's the essential definition of what it is to be a Yid, to be a Jew. A Jew is a makabel Torah. Everything is zeicha l'tzias Mitzrayim, as the Kuzari brings down. Zeicha l'tzias Mitzrayim means Mitzrayim that leads into Har Sinai. That is the definition of everything. That we are the ones that came out of Egypt and got the Torah. The fundamental moment in Jewish history. All of Jewish history is built around, number one, belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, number two, Har Sinai, and everything that came with Har Sinai, and number three, that we're going to the rectification of the sin. Shema Yisrael, Hashem, Creator, Elokeinu, He runs the world hidden, based Elokeinu, based on Har Sinai, Hashem Echad, and that's what the world is going to. That's the fundamental Judaism that we believe in. So now, we've answered really all of our questions, but I want to just take it a little bit deeper. First of all, how have we answered our questions? By definition, the Rambam comes in without mentioning the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, because that's the mitzvah kileles, as the Megillah Esther says. That is the air that we breathe. That's the essential definition of what it means. A Jew does not need to come with a commandment. You don't command a person to exist. You don't command a person to exist. We started by saying who's not commanded? Women and the slaves. Okay, so women should not think that because they have no chiyuv of Talmud Torah, they have no chiyuv to teach Torah, doesn't mean that they are not there at Har Sinai. So if by chance there's a woman listening over here, so you are an equal partner. Kisayma lebeis Yaakov, the sagid lebnei Yisrael. Women are the bias of Torah. Women are the enablers of Torah. If you have a chance, I just gave a share. I put it up on my website. It's on Torah Anytime, called More Than Cheesecake. Why Kabbalah Torah is a woman's chag, explaining the role of the women. But their obligation is to preserve Torah, to give a bias to Torah, to be a kli to the Torah that comes in. The Torah comes in here. The women are the kli. But to teach Torah, that is the obligation of the men who bring Torah from Shemaim down into this world, and men have an obligation to continue all the time with that teaching Torah, and that's the reason why when the Rambam talks about teaching yourself, he doesn't say you have to learn Torah. He says you have to continue Har Sinai for yourself. That's called Lelamed. It's a constant process of Hanshacha, of taking Har Sinai and continuing it, generation after generation, until the end of days, until Mashiach finishes his job together with Klal Yisrael. That's called Lelamed. In Halacha Ches, there's a separate Halacha when Yeshua crosses over the Yarden with Klal Yisrael. Don't allow yourself to be overwhelmed. You have to achiv to be v'gisa b'yom v'layla. As you all know, the Gemara in Menachos brings down the minimum is Shema Yisrael, morning and evening. But really and truly, a person should study Torah whenever they can, as the Rambam goes on to say, with dividing 1/3 of your day, 8 hours a day, is what a Balabas should study Torah, says the Rambam. Okay, let's take this all a whole level deeper. And I want to give over what you've all learned. As children, everyone knows this famous Nefesh HaChaim. Every single one of you is expected to have learned at some point Nefesh HaChaim Rav Chaim Volozhina. It is the handbook to how to live a Torah life. If you want, you can say, just like in Chabad, they have Sefer Atanya. So in the yeshiva world, they have Nefesh HaChaim. There's a lot of overlap between the two if you study them both. But there, the Nefesh HaChaim, in a few places, he brings down, most famously in Shar Dalet, where he talks about Torah, and he takes understanding Torah on a new level, which is be'etzim the oimek of what the Rambam is teaching us. What does he say? It's all based on the Zohar, and Zohar Vayikra Yud Aleph, when he says, Ha'olam lo nivra el b'shvil Torah, and I'm going to read to you his words. Umi'az, shenishtal shala v'yarda kiviyachol, mimkar shersha hanelam v'zeh ha'olam. What happened to Har Sinai? Torah came down. It's one of the Yud Gimel Ikrem, is that we have Torah min Hashem Mind. Until the year 2448, Torah existed in this hidden place in the higher worlds. How did the world survive till then? Teva. Instead of breathing Torah, we breathe oxygen. That's how the world existed. Kamamar Zechron Livracha, Ba Moshe, Vahirida La'aretz, Kol Chiyusam, Vikiyumam Shel Kol Ha'olamis, Hurak Al Yedei Hevel Pinu, Ve'egyonenu Ba. So after Har Sinai, after that awesome 6th of Sivan, which was actually the 7th of Sivan, we've spoken about this, the whole chiyus and the kiyum of the whole higher worlds is through our speech of us learning Torah, hevel pinu v'hegyonenu ba, and going deep into it. V'ha'emes bilti shum safek klal, shim haya ha'olam kulei mikatzeu v'ad katzeu, panui, chas v'shalom, af rega echad mamish, meha'esek v'hizbaynish lana b'Torah. The world, for one short second, did not have Yidden learning Torah, Asek, deeply, his bayness, thinking well into Torah. Berega hayu nechravim kol ha'olamis, elyonim v'tachtainim. All the higher worlds would disappear and be destroyed instantly. V'haya le'efes v'chas v'shalom. Everything would go back le'efes v'toyu, and therefore v'chein shifas oiram oimiot chas v'shalom hakol rak kefi inyan v'reiv eskeni ba. The amount of light that the higher worlds bring down into our world, the amount of hester panim versus the amount of haaretz panim, is dependent on us studying the Torah. Everyone should, they haven't learned recently Nefesh HaChaim, go back to it again. The chashivas of learning Torah this time of the year is something so fundamental for us. But now we have a whole different understanding of what the Megillas Esther meant when he says the Rambam doesn't mention the obligation of studying Torah. V'shenamtum levanecha v'dibarta bam. Right, the mitzvah v'dibarta bam is not mentioned except for v'shenamtum levanecha, because what is really happening over here is that we're taught that from now onwards, your studying Torah is your way of keeping the universes intact. Everything is in your hands. In Volozhin, Rav Chaim Volozhiner, Blishitasa, he had Starm 24 hours around the clock. Because he says, what, at night we stop learning? How can that be? The yeshiva starts at night. And there were people that had to learn, from 3 a.m. to 6 a.m. to make sure that there's Torah around the clock. Today we don't have that in yeshivas. But today, this is how I always understood it, we have yeshivas in Australia. Why? Because that is two different ends of the clock. I'm learning now, it's 6:55 a.m., and for you, it's 11:55 a.m. For Chaim Zimmerman, it's 9:55 a.m. It's Rav Shmuel Ross. Okay, this is crazy that it has to be Torah around the clock. So Hashem split us around the world so that there's always Torah being learned. But Torah being learned for us is the way that we're Mamshich Har Sinai, which now on a deeper level we understand differently. It's not just, as the Kuzari said, that the Jewish people became the fifth level. The Jewish people did not just become the fifth level. The Jewish people became the ones that took the whole universe and changed its essential DNA. And from now onwards, the world exists through Torah. Torah is the new oxygen. That's what Rav Chaim Volozhin is saying. Torah is the new oxygen. The Rambam's not teaching us hashkafa. The Rambam expects us to know that Torah is the new oxygen. And therefore, the Rambam began with the negative, those people who are exempt from bringing this oxygen into this world. They have a different role. The women, they're the ones that empower it. But the bottom line is that the definition of Talmud Torah, says the Rambam, is to perpetuate the world of Torah, meaning to take what happened at Har Sinai and make sure that Har Sinai continues and continues and continues. So I'm a little bit rushing because I started late, but I want to give us just a little bit of chizuk for the coming days that are ahead of us. I started off with a question. For those of you that missed the opening moments, Rashi says Har Sinai means that hatred came into this world. Which hatred are we talking about? Not the hatred of the Goyim of us, but the hatred that we have for the Goyim. Well, why do we hate the nations of the world? It's very, very simple. Because if the Goyim were on board, we wouldn't be in exile. If the Goyim were on board, then right there at Har Sinai, we could have brought the world back to the Garden of Eden and fixed everything. Reb Chaim Volozhner writes, earlier on in the Sefer, he says that our davening Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, to a lesser extent, but mainly in Rosh Hashanah, is all about bringing the nations of the world back to where they belong. Yishmael, back to the house of Avram. Esav, that part of Esav that can be fixed from the neck upwards, back into the house of Yitzchak. Bringing the 70 nations so that they should be on board, and that is what finally brings this world into the next world, where there's a harmony of all of Hashem's creation, including the Ummah Ha'olam, in a Kadosh Baruch Hu's great plan. They did not come on board. We hate them. You messed up. Everything we're going through, all the suffering that we're going through, is because you did not find your place that you should have found in Tikkun Ha'olam, in being Mamshich Har Sinai. You were not on board. That's where the hatred comes from. What does this all mean? Nafkimena lahalacha, in how we work during the next 3 days of Hachana for Har Sinai. Shleishis Yemei Hagbala, we're in those last 3 days, the last 3 climactic days of Sfiras HaOmer, and then we're going to have the Yom Tov itself. So the first thing, besides trying to learn every single moment that we can in all our spare time, is to realize the achrayus that we have to do 2 things. Number 1 is to learn Torah, but number 2 is to teach Torah. The definition of Har Sinai is ultimately, as the Rambam says, is lulmoid ululamed, is to teach Torah. Who has to teach Torah? It's interesting, just by pure chance, I heard Rav Asher Weiss speak on Monday, and this was his whole speech. I think he was quoting his Rebbe, the Kleisenberger. He says that everyone thinks, who teaches Torah? The teachers teach Torah. Well, I'm talking to a whole group of teachers now. Each one of you is a influencer in Torah in your community. But he says it's not the point. The point is that everyone has to be a teacher. And if you have what to teach, if you can teach one person, even if you yourself are considered a regular balabasa, even labelist in Am Aretz, but if you have what to teach, teach it. And I would like to add on behalf of all you people out there, that what you teach has to be authentic. If you don't know what you're teaching, God forbid, you are distorting Torah or watering down Torah, that we see so many of our Makarvim, that Hashem Yerachim, it's such an ugly sight to see people that don't really know what they're teaching teach. It's a chil Hashem. I'm talking about people that actually, you know something and you know that this is what you know is authentic. Teach it to the next person. And then you become what the Rambam says, the mitzvah of Talmud Torah, kitikuna, you're melamed acherim. So the first thing is that we have to recognize that on Har Sinai, we're accepting the Torah to learn Torah and to teach it. That is what the mitzvah is. And secondly, and with here I'm going to close, is my eitzah to every single one of us on the Yom Hadin. What I mean the Yom Hadin Every year, Rav Moshe Pura used to say this, but it's not just my Rebbe Rav Moshe. All the Mashkichim, the Rosh Hashiva say that Rosh Hashanah is the Yom Hadin for the whole year, but Shavuos is the Yom Hadin for the Torah community, where we ask the HaKadosh Baruch Hu for another year of Siyata Dishmaya. And Tashin Pei Hei is going to have its own unique Kabbalah Torah in a world that has gone crazy, like we mentioned before, and all the anti-Semitism, all the hatred, and all the tzaras that we're going through, and all the attacks that we're having on the Jewish home, with our children struggling with the world of the internet, and that's just the children, the adults as well. Everything trying to get us off, get us not focused. A world of Galus Yishmael, where the Jewish home is no longer safe anymore. And we have to re-accept the Torah. And the Ikka Avodah that we have on Shavuos is not the learning all night long, but the tefillos that come with that. We have to turn to HaKadosh Baruch Hu on Shavuos and beg him for these two things. One is our Torah, and the other, which is the corollary and goes hand in hand, is the ability to teach it further. And the Ikka place traditionally is in the Bracha Ava Rabbah. I remember when I first went to yeshiva, my first year in Itri, the yeshiva was filled with Talmid Chacham. I didn't understand. Ava Rabbah took, I don't know, 5 minutes. Everyone was crying and crying. Avinu ha'ava rachamam, hamarachim, rachim aleinu, v'sein bili bein lahavin, u'lahaskel, lishmoya, lilmoid, u'lalamed, lishma v'lases. It's called divrei sama terasecha ba'ava. If you have a chance to open up the Ali Shor, Rav Wolbe goes and explains each word exactly what it's referring to. But we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we should learn Torah and we should teach Torah. So for our Chabura, what does it mean? We should learn Torah. It means we should have chavrusas. Ask Hashem for good chavrusas. I ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and I'm hoping you do as well, for the success of what we're doing right here, to try and learn Torah at the highest possible level. And we ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu for being able to learn all the halakim of the Torah. We ask HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the health to be able to think clearly and go deeply into the Torah. All these needs that you have in the world of Torah, you should ask for it and ask for it and ask for it. The best place is there in Ava Rabbah. But you should know, and I want to give you, and with this I'm going to end, I want to give you good advice. Rabbi Sai, when you daven on Shavuos, your Shmona Esreis, I only have 4 because I live in Eretz Yisrael. You guys have 8. You're so fortunate. You have an extra 4. Before you take your 3 steps back, you talk to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in your natural language, which is English for Moshe Freilich. It's in Ivrit, B'lashon HaKodesh. And you tell HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's day of Kabbalah Torah. The Rambam taught us I have an obligation to be mamshich the Torah. Reb Chaim Volozhiner taught us that if I don't mamshich the Torah, the world will go back to Torah v'vayihu. Beg HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the kelim, the intellectual kelim, the right chafrusas, the right svarim, whatever it is that you feel is important for you. That I should be a ben Torah kipshutai. A ben Torah is someone that when I learn, it could be I'm doing other things, that's the centerpiece of everything. Everything I do comes from that 1 hour I set aside a day from learning. The way I run my marriage, the way I raise my kids, the way I deal with my neighbors, the way I work in the workforce, all comes from my continuation of what happened there at Har Sinai that I never let it end. And then the rest, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will do for us. If we're zeicher to become real people that are continuing the world of Har Sinai, and we're partners in that, because Baruch Hu will give us the Dishmaya for everything we do in our marriages and in our chinuch of our children, in our health. And ultimately, the ripple effects will affect all of Klal Yisrael. May it be HaKadosh Baruch Hu's will that our ability to be mamshich in this crazy world, this pre-Mashiach world, Tashin Pei Hei, that the original plan of Har Sinai, which was supposed to include the Umas Ha'olam, will finally get there to the Bias HaGel, to the Melech HaMashiach, which will bring Har Sinai to every corner of the world, to every nation of the world, so that the whole universe, all of Bria, will be nothing more than covered to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, nothing more than the iris of the Elyonim will come down to the lower world in its full revelation of the Or Haganos. We should all be zeichet to see this meher v'yameinu. We should all be zeichet to wish you all a good Yom Tov and bracha v'atzlacha. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.